Hi, everyone. One of the important characters of Dostoevsky novels, I'm back to Dostoevsky, so we'll live in Tolstoy till the next weekend. And I thought that St. Petersburg was also one of the main characters or always a kind of a recurrent character, right? In all the novels of Dostoevsky. So let's give it just a little more attention, maybe, because it definitely deserves it. So there's Dostoevsky himself. We're not focusing on his literature. We're focusing more of the vibe of the city and the city the way Dostoevsky clearly saw. And as I said, as you know, there is a big area in the city that we locals refer to as the Petersburg of Fyodor Dostoevsky. So I thought to myself to begin the tour next to the monument to Dostoevsky. It's in the city center, basically, like 10 minutes walk from the main avenue, that is the Nevsky Avenue. There is even a metro station called Dostoyevsky metro station, Vladimirsky metro station. There are a lot of Dostoevsky squares and streets in Russia in general. I'm not just saying St. Petersburg. I'm just saying in general. Dostoevsky was not uh, ignored, was not forbidden by the Bolsheviks because he, especially after he was sentenced to was well, first he was sentenced to death penalty, right? Because he was caught present in one of the gatherings of the opposition, but he was pardoned the very last moment, and that definitely was a game changer for him. So eventually, he didn't write anything oppositional. He wrote about common people and the hardships of the poor people, and obviously these type of things were very welcomed by the Bolsheviks and by the Soviets in general throughout the Soviet period. So there is quite a big heritage of Fyodor Dostoevsky everywhere in Russia where he was, and he's remembered. Kolokolnaya Street, that's the street that we walked in the previous tour. I mean, a week ago, we did a tour of the gingerbread house. If you missed that tour, I highly recommend to check it out. That's a beautiful house. I'm going to giving you a little recap on it later on. So this area still has a lot of gems. These are not the gems normally shown. So that's the gingerbread house. We visited two apartments inside the house, and we also walked in the courtyard and we saw a beautiful lobby. So, well, okay, not the opulent and wonderful, but the lovely lobby. Okay, let's put it like that. And most of these houses are like local gems that tourists normally do not see. Well, those who go for Dostoevsky tours, they see something. But since this is a tour of like a broader context, there is something that normally tourists didn't used to see. Well, when I say tourists see, I'm not referring to the way things are now. There's a different tourists, different times. I'm just referring to the times that I remember before the war and before the pandemic. So that's the gingerbread house, lovely, gorgeous tile work, and it's a fairy tale house to me. So this house deserves to be somewhere in the city center, but I'm happy that it's not because otherwise it would have been so photographed and always full of people. But that street, that avenue is so quiet. So the Dostoevsky St. Petersburg is the area that hasn't changed at all, and it's still very quiet. That's what I like about St. Petersburg that has like almost 5 million people population. So the monument that we are standing right now next to Fyodor Dostoevsky is overlooking an avenue. It's called Vladimirsky Avenue. There is Vladimirsky metro station, and that's what the area looks like now. And as you see, there is a church, right? So, and the church, as you might have guessed, is Vladimirskaya Church. And this was the church where Dostoevsky himself would go for services very often, the Cathedral of Vladimir Icon of the Mother of God. So that's the church and the bell tower, and the Kolokolne street that we visited last time for the gingerbread house is named exactly after this bell tower. So because from there, if you're standing by the bell tower, you can see Kolokolne Street, and the other way around. So from that street, you see the bell tower. Originally, church looked a little bit different, and well, I have we have quite a lot of photos of this area because it was full of different businesses. It was a very uh, big church, very big parish, and well, there were a lot of poor people who would go to this church, and also a lot of rich people. And the church is the place where everyone is equal, so you could find really, really diverse representatives of St. Petersburg society around that church. And it's clearly this is the Dostoevsky area. He would go to this church very often, and for him, whenever he lived in the city, one of the prerequisites for choosing a place would be actually so that from his windows he could see a church. That was important. So he was a highly religious man, especially after what happened to him after his imprisonment and his miraculous escape from death. Well, it was just a pardon from the emperor, but anyway, yeah, so we could have lost him. We just could not. Well, I mean, we may have not had Dostoevsky at all, which is a bummer. This is one of the earliest photographs of the church. You see the streets are still not paved, but they would be very soon. So they finished the church by the third quarter of the 19th century. And before that, there used to be a smaller church, well, because of a smaller size, but because the area started to grow and population started to grow, it needed a bigger church. And the Vladimirsky Avenue eventually ends into Nevsky Avenue. But if from there we turn right, we'll find ourselves on in an alley, and in that alley we actually walk together because this street will eventually take you to the house where Dostoevsky lived. But as we go, we're going to look at the other buildings which had already been built when Dostoevsky lived. So he would just walk past these buildings every single day. Pension houses. We're going to see three houses built next to one another. This is the oldest part of it. The building was changed, and well, now you see that there is this balcony. It's kind of a bay window and the balcony, but it's no longer there, so it was changed. I'm not sure at which period, but well, it doesn't look the same anymore. This is the oldest house that Khanshin built for himself. Khanshin was a merchant, a very rich one. He owned a gold mine in Siberia, and that alone was a big deal. But actually, before owning a gold mine, bought, he bought a permission, a license from the state to sell alcohol. And selling alcohol, alcohol business was extremely sensitive thing and very difficult and expensive thing to run, but it was definitely it all would pay off. So it wasn't an easy thing to start and not an easy business field to enter. But once you're there, you're all good. You're all good. So Kanchan had both alcohol and gold. So I guess that pretty much explains everything. So first he built a house for himself and where his family live. And when his children got older, he bought a house for his son, and next one for his daughter. The orange one is house for his daughter, and the pink one is the house for his son. And those were not just the houses where they lived; they were also income houses. Well, this one was first just built for his son, but his son eventually also rented out a part of the house and his daughter as well. So those were also this is the investment. And as I explained it on previous tours, but many of my tours overlap, but I don't expect you to join all of them. So I'll quickly repeat myself that an income house is a house that is a private property, normally purchased with a bank loan, and Kanchan also took a bank loan, which paid off extremely quickly, and he paid off the mortgage and everything very quickly. But that was normally the case. The interest rate was 1 or 2%, not like it is nowadays, where the mortgage is more than 10%, I think, in Russia. But I may be wrong; it may be even more than 10%, which is already a rip-off. But okay, this is just a whole different topic. And uh, Normally, this was the best way to invest in real estate in St. Petersburg. So he built these houses both for his children, but so that these houses would also give money, give constant income to his children further on, which was a very clever thing to do. From here, you can still see the domes of the Vladimir Cathedral, and also just opposite the Kanshin houses, there is a market, and this is the market that had existed during times of Dostoevsky, and he would go to the market very often, and everyone who well, all the vendors in the market, they knew Dostoevsky, obviously. Kuznechny Market it's called. The avenue is also Kuznechny Avenue, like Blacksmith Avenue, because historically in early 19th century, this was the area where blacksmiths used to live. Just like that. That's why it's the Blacksmith Market, Kuznechny Market. In the Soviet times, it was the building of the market was rebuilt in the Soviet times. Before that, it was largely an open air market. That's why you see here the hammer and sickle. But originally, well, I found a photo. It looked like that. Just an ordinary market, open air, wooden stalls, uh, just that. So. And I used to take a lot of tourists to this market because it's not far from the town. You can easily escape from the noisy St. Petersburg, Nevsky Avenue, and 10 minutes walk and you are in a totally different area and totally different vibe and a very authentic market. Yes. Plus, I knew several vendors that sold really good handmade souvenirs and well, if it ever got to souvenirs, I would go there because I know those were not, China made stuff. It was something made by locals. So yeah. Anyway, so let's go on. And the most beautiful house is the youngest, and it's the one who it's it's the house that we are going to visit, the lobby. Huh? Right. So look at that. This is just a lobby, right? But you remember that we judge the book by its cover, so it has to have the house in order to have a very good clientele and make sure people pay you a good rent and you pay off your mortgage quickly. You need to invest a little bit in the way how it looks. So the beautiful facade and the lobby. So I think that lobby spoke for itself. Obviously, it has been restored recently. However, unlike many houses from the 19th century, this building was not completely overhauled. Like they did not change the wiring. The wiring is still, well, I would say, I'm not sure in this particular part, but in general, there is still a very old wiring and a lot of wooden bulks are still in the construction. They're trying to substitute at least what they can with metal, but it's not always possible. And right now, this is not the residential building. It used to be. It's a business center, and because of that, it's easily accessible. It doesn't have a code. Normally, such beautiful lobbies, if it's a simple residential building, would be closed, or it would be, kind of a code lock or something. Well, that's not the case with this one. And also, as we go from this beautiful ground floor, we see a fireplace. And it was very common for houses of this style, of this class, because it was cold in St. Petersburg. It's just in general, a cold city. However, well, what did they know about the cold in Siberia, where my parents live? It was minus 38 Celsius today. Minus 38 Celsius. Um, that's cold, like very cold. And St. Petersburg, well, okay, it was close to that during the, let's say, the siege time, the Second World War. So technically speaking, it could be the same cold in St. Petersburg in the 19th century, but this kind of really extremes. But anyway, so it was very common for houses of such class to also have the heating, to have a gas lamp, because electricity came a little later. Obviously, no elevators, and because of no elevators. Well, the floor on which your apartment was obviously depended on your budget. That's for sure. Again, this is not a functioning fireplace anymore, obviously. However, this is the original fireplace anyway, and it's original place, and the mantelpiece also is original. Nothing extraordinary because it's just a public area, but still, it's nice to have something like that. And it's also nice to see these buildings in a very good condition, recently restored, at least recently painted. Um, by the way, I'm not sure. Maybe the upper floors, maybe those are residential, but from what I remember back then, it was a business center. And well, but you see that not all buildings have been restored yet, or at least, kind of brushed up. But this building was, and this building is important because this is the house where Dostoevsky lived. And the Dostoevsky Museum that we visited together is also located in this very house, the corner building. Dostoevsky liked corner buildings, he liked corner apartments because they were bigger, but they were not more expensive because corner apartments were usually colder. Well, uh, because the all the walls of the apartment are exposed to the street, and the bigger apartments were a bit more difficult to warm, and they were usually colder, and that's why they were a little bit cheaper. So Dostoevsky liked it very much, and plus from his balcony, which he liked to stand on a daily basis, he could see the bell towers. He could see the domes and the bell tower of the Vladimir Cathedral. So it all makes sense. And he lived in this house, by the way, twice. It was his first place that he rented, and he also rented apartment in this house again when it was already rebuilt, because this house originally was much smaller, and there were two houses on one and the same plot. But the landowner decided to completely tear down the old building and build a much bigger one. And Dostoevsky, well, rented it 20 years later, and that was his it became his last address. And we visited that museum. All the tours that I'm referring to, I know that sometimes I'm referring to so many tours, and if you are new to my channel, if you are by chance just discovered me on YouTube as a recording of this video or something, well, I'm referring to all those tours, but there is a way to catch up with them. There is a sponsorship option that costs $10 per month extra to the tips. It's just something separate. And with this, you get a link. There is about 950 videos of all sorts of tours: in Petersburg, Israel, Georgia, and also some other places. So there's a lot. Whenever I'm referring to a tour and you want to see it, and if you're my sponsor, you can't find it, just let me know. If you want to become a sponsor, contact me. But there's also links on the webs on the chat here. And if you want to see just one tour, well, and you don't feel like becoming a sponsor, just contact me. I will send you this link. This is not a problem. But I refer to a lot of the tours, and I hope this it's okay with you. So we visited that museum. We are not talking about it. And by the way, in this very house, Fyodor Dostoevsky finished his Crime and Punishment, and also many other works, Karamazov's brothers too. And in terms of the literary works, check out Misha's tours. The second tour is still available. Yes, Misha is waving at you. Yes, and you see a memorial plaque. So this is exactly about Dostoevsky and his life in this building. Oh, and by the way, in that street, you may have noticed a house. Well, I need to go back there. No, not that one, not what. Okay, give me a second. Yeah, so you see this house like dark red. It's a bit blurry, but you kind of have it's not really a beautiful house to look at. It's still waiting for its time to be restored, but uh, there is a bakery now. It's a popular like bakery network of bakeries in the city. But during Dostoevsky, there was a bakery too. And Dostoevsky himself every morning would go to that bakery and buy bread. and some sweet stuff too. And there's still a bakery, which is lovely. So that's just how everything is connected. Yeah, and now we are entering one of the famous St. Petersburg courtyards, and you see the portrait here is the same portrait I showed you when the tour started. So this is the one of the ways, one of the roads that Dostoevsky took himself to just get around the area. Because when buildings are located one next to another, which we call the red line of St. Petersburg, how would you get to the next street? How would you go? I don't know. You need to go to the end of the quarter. Like, what are you going to do? You would go through these backyards and connecting courtyards. That was the system. So it's just a system of all these mazes, which is so amazing about St. Petersburg. And let's just walk and explore. I said you judge the book by its cover, so yeah, the landlords was the landowners would splash on the facade, but from the inside, in most cases, it would look just like that. I mean, it's so depressing, and this yellow color is not exactly the sunny sunflower color, it's just the color of with, for example, when I look at this, it gives me kind of a hospital vibes for some reason. It's also there is kind of a local thing. There was built a psychiatric hospital in St. Petersburg, big psychiatric hospital, and it was also yellow. So, I mean, it was not that unusual. There are a lot of yellow houses in St. Petersburg, but people would say when someone is going mental, they would say, "Oh, you're so mental. You should go to the yellow house." Like, so I don't know, maybe that's why it gives me this yellow vibes, hospital vibes, and I don't know, yellow vibes. You're giving me yellow vibes. There should be an idiom like that in English. There should be, I think so. Anyway, so you see windows overlooking other windows, your neighbor's windows, and it's just yellow walls and all these. Well, this hasn't been cleaned, obviously, with heavy rains, with heavy snowfalls. This it didn't look bright and shiny, honestly. And again, this is probably the worst shade of yellow. Uh, well, we spoke about the beautiful lobby, right, with all these lovely caryatids, these beautiful ladies, topless and everything. Well, that was the gala entrance for the tenants. But well, this is not the same house, but the principle is very much the same. So every tenant houses would have the main entrance for people who live in the house, who pay the rent, and there would be also a servant staircase would be somewhere from the back side where the entrance would be through the courtyard, right? And it would be as plain as possible, dark, narrow, because you need to build apartments bigger, but the staircase for for the kitchen maids, for the dvorniks, for the street sweepers, and all the service people. Why would they need big staircases, even if they carry buckles of water? Why would they? They could just handle it on a narrow staircase. Why doing that? So we are going to look at a very simple, super plain, absolutely average staircase. It's not a staircase uh, for servants anymore. It's just an ordinary staircase, but it gives you a very different vibe, right? I would prefer entering through the previous courtyard. However, it doesn't mean that every house looked that way, but every house had such a staircase. So that's 100%. You see, no decoration, nothing at all. And also, these staircases, they were not really touched by, during the Soviet times, they would not be robbed or looted or anything. So sometimes they still have, they are the most authentic in the buildings. They have some minor decorations if they had them, and it's still with them. This is an interesting thing. Looks a little bit surrealistic to me, right? It's giving me maybe Salvador Dali vibes. So you see this like absolutely brick wall, like absolutely thick and well solid. And then yeah, you see that window over there. This is a big violation in fact. Because of this red line of St. Petersburg, buildings built one next to another, like wall next to the wall of just another building, and you can't even, I don't know, sometimes even you can't even put a credit card between the two walls. That's just like the walls of the Temple Mount. The same thing. Herod did a good job. That's not Herod, but anyway. And they, because of that, and because there was a lot of wood used in the construction, in the frame, like in the skeleton of the building, it was wooden. The conflagration was a big risk. So there was a rule. There had to be a brandmauer. There had to be a wall, that firewall that would protect the other building from, well, catching fire from another. And there wasn't supposed to be a window, so that was clearly a violation. Well, it's not really relevant to the buildings that don't, well, it's not that relevant anymore. So, but at which point it was violated, that's a good question. Probably in the Soviet period. It's really hard to say. And I don't know whether people had to pay for it or they had to bribe someone for it. But normally it was prohibited. So it was prohibited. There were a lot of rules with regards to how buildings had to look like, the height of the buildings. They couldn't be higher than the Winter Palace. During the 19th century, that was a big no-no. And so there had to be courtyards always, but the size of the courtyard was not really mentioned. So that's why many courtyards were absolutely tiny. And well, we were lucky with some of you who was, well, those of you who were with me back in 2021, we did some tours in these courtyards, and you saw some absolutely narrow ones, and we will see some of them super narrow. And well, I would say some of them are even scary, and when you think of it, I don't know, like, some of those courtyards are still haunting me even. So I know a courtyard that was just like of like a span of like of my hands basically. So the arm span, like my arm span. That was it. So there are a couple of courtyards like that. This is the gingerbread house that I showed you last week. And again, that tour recording, I keep my tour recordings for 1 week on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to be closing access around these days, but it's still going to be lingering there for a while because I will be busy with something else, just to try to understand what I'm going to do in the next couple of weeks. I don't know. Yep, I'm getting you these yellow vibes too. I'm giving you those yellow vibes too, like, you know, anxiety ridden vibes. I know, I know. Don't thank me. Don't thank me. So the gingerbread house, let's look at that. We're not going to explore it because we have already done that. And I, well, this area developed in mid 19th century and sometimes early 19th century in some of these areas, but it doesn't mean that the buildings still look the same. Many would be rebuilt with times, like the house where Dostoevsky lived. And there used to be a much smaller building located here, which was torn down. And this one was built by Nikonov, sorry, Nikolai Nikonov. And he was a church architect originally. He specialized in the architecture of like pre Moscow style architecture, like pre before St. Petersburg architecture. But this is Kolokolny Avenue, but we are turning from the gingerbread house to the Poverskoy Lane. You may have noticed that a lot of streets and mainly lanes here are named after certain trades, like Blacksmith Lane. Poverskoy Lane means the kitchen maid or like kind of a chef's. Well, not really about chefs. It's like kitchen maids, right? Different, well, people who were involved in cooking. So this is the area where they settled, where they had their workshops. Poverskoy. It's pretty common throughout the old Russia to have lanes like that. It was convenient. It was Peter's idea, which he brought from Europe, to, let's say, build the streets specifically, for different needs of different, trades and businesses. So There is a tapestry street, Palermo Street, where there were several tapestry manufacturers, and there were many streets like that. So this is where kitchen maids lived, and also there were some workshops here. This house, we are standing now exactly at the corner. So you see there is I'm not sure, I don't know exactly when this photo was taken, but this photo exactly shows what I was talking about, that the buildings got rebuilt. For example, if you look at your right, next to this lovely pink house, you see a building of like 2 floors. So originally, in the first half of the 19th century, there used to be built so the entire all this neighborhood had the buildings like this. So this is the old style buildings. This is the first half of the 19th century. But the pink one is much newer. This is the late 19th century eclecticism. Yeah. So, but originally it was a very rural area. If you remember, St. Petersburg used to be way, way, way smaller. And this area was just the countryside. And then it was the kind of the border between St. Petersburg and the countryside until it just became part of the city. But for a long time, and even still, it feels a little bit not rural, but just quieter, a little bit at a distance. Still, still. But the story about this house is interesting also because it is connected to Georgia, to Prince Nicholas Bagration of Mukhrani. And the Bagrationi family, we know already, we've spoken a lot about them because Bagrationi is the royal dynasty. They believe, which is just a legend, but they believe that Bagrationi dynasty actually goes back all the way to King David of Israel, which is, it hasn't been proven. There's no way to even prove that. Most scholars are convinced that it's not exactly true, but they believe in it. And there are some descendants living in Georgia and also in Europe from the Bagrationi family, and I might at some point even do a tour, but let's just talk about this gentleman himself. So he was a prince, so and you know, Georgian aristocracy was given the same rights as Russian aristocracy after Georgia was annexed by the Russian Empire. So Bagrationi was a big dynasty with a lot of people, and he was just one of them. He was just one of those many multiple princes. He wasn't exactly how shall I put it? He for a long time he didn't really know what to do with himself. He had the money, but he was looking for his place in life, for his role in life, right, for his mission. And eventually he's seated here in this photo, and the man next to him is his friend. I have no idea. The photo was taken in Paris, so he traveled a lot. This is him with his family. He is wearing a national costume. He's the second to right in the middle row, wearing traditional Georgian choha garment, like an overcoat with containers for gunpowder. And he obviously also served in the army, but he didn't serve there for life. And eventually, so he went traveling, and he decided not to end in Europe. He went to Africa. And as he approached Alexandria, it became known to him that the Second Boer War started. So it's the war between basically England and its colonies in Africa, Northern Africa, and he just decided, he didn't know much about it, but upon his arrival, he was quickly explained what it was like. And since he himself was from a small country that had been previously annexed so many times, it wasn't just the Russian Empire, but the story of annexations and invasions all the time. He obviously supported Africa, and he joined the war. Eventually, he was captured, and he was kept for several months on the island of Saint Helena, which that's exactly where Napoleon was buried. And he spoke about this time in his diary, in his memoirs, and he said that he would go to the burial site of Napoleon quite a lot. And so he spent several months. uh, he was kind of a prisoner of war, but he could walk freely on Saint Helena. It was just kind of the area where the British would bring everyone who they didn't like, who supported Africa. This is the photo taken in 1899. The photo was taken uh, by someone, and later on, someone I found it on one of the Georgian websites. You see, there is a kind of a mark with a pen, so it's kind of an arrow, a blue arrow. So this blue arrow is pointing at Nico, and well, but this was made much later. It was done much later. I don't know exactly when, but I just completely rely on this photo and on the source here. And later on, he was released and he returned to Georgia. And he died in Georgia pretty poor. He couldn't really find what to do in life, and largely he was this representative of the so-called lost generation. Um, well, yes, he didn't serve in the First World War, but he still felt he was kind of the man of the lost generation. And yeah, that's an interesting story. And before he set off with his big Euro trip and also African trip, he lived in St. Petersburg. He bought a house and got a good income from the house. So that was his property up until the revolution. Yep. Okay. And this photo was taken in Georgia, and we are now walking exactly past this pink house to the right. Well, that's the uh, house of Bagration Muhrani. This avenue is one of the most boring avenues, and remember I told you that for many, all these buildings look absolutely the same back then. And it was very depressive, just really super depressing to live in St. Petersburg in those days. Well, let me tell you about Vsevolod Garshin. He is a Russian writer, very talented one, but you've never heard of him. He's not studied at schools in Russia either, so I would say average Russian has never heard of Vsevolod Garshin too. But I like this portrait a lot because this portrait was painted by Ilya Repin, and this was also painted by Ilya Repin. Repin was a very good friend, and he used Repin used Garshin as a model. Lena, thank you so much for your coffees. Thank you, dear. He used Garshin as a model for some of his most iconic works. This is Ilya Repin, and we visited his house, his estate, and a museum in the I would say gorgeous winter fairy tale setting, and that was the last tour, the last video I recorded like myself fully before leaving Russia back in 2022. So it was at the European Museum, Penate it's called. That tour is also available for my sponsors. That was a winter fairy tale for sure, with the white snow, fluffy snow everywhere around. So Ilya Repin, one of the best and most popular artists of the 20th century, early 20th century Russia. And I'm sure at least this artwork is familiar to most of you. Ivan the Terrible killing his own son. So the son, model for the son was Vsevolod Garshin. And well, this painting, when it was presented to public, caused so much public outcry. Many people, well, especially women, would faint. That's how realistic it was. Yeah, it's also giving me this yellow vibes. And the thing is that Garshin himself suffered from schizophrenia. And why a person who suffers from schizophrenia would live in this particular area? There are other less depressing areas in St. Petersburg, but he lived here in one of the most bleak buildings too. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, look at this avenue. And the gingerbread house was built way later, so like I feel so sorry. So, and many friends, and Repin himself wanted to help Garshin. He had all these fits of schizophrenia so often, and he was recommended to go to the Caucasus, of course, because the Caucasus was the place where all the people who suffered from certain for any diseases would be sent to. You have a lung disease, you have tuberculosis, go to the Caucasus. You have dermatitis, allergies, go to the Caucasus. You have anginas, I don't know, all sorts of like nose diseases, go to the Caucasus. Mental issues, you go to the Caucasus too. And one day, just before he was about to go to the Caucasus, he jumped from the staircase. This is the staircase from this particular house. It looks like the staircase in the previous building, but that house it wasn't an opulent one, wasn't an expensive one, didn't have really the main staircase and the servant staircase. That's the house. Again, it's one of the most bleak and it's one of the most depressing, really depressing buildings in the neighborhood. And it's like knowing the story of Garshin, it's kind of this is part of the neighborhood. This is it. This is it. But however, we have a little time to talk about I don't want to finish at such a note. I mean, I don't want it to. I don't want to feel even more depressed. So, the Stremenaya Street, Stremenaya Street. Basically, this is the street where they would produce harness for animals, for horses. And this street had some interesting Art Nouveau. And I would like to finish off with a beautiful Art Nouveau house in the area because I like Art Nouveau. Almost all of us like Art Nouveau. So let's talk about this Art Nouveau. But it's not the kind of the Barcelona Art Nouveau. It's not. It's Northern Art Nouveau. A depressing Art Nouveau. Depressive Art Nouveau. Northern Art Nouveau, reserved, dark, because local stone, right? You use local stones. In Art Nouveau, it was one of the ideas. You use local materials. You give decorations, that are typical, for this area. So architect Alexei Bubin, who was who was is one of my favorite St. Petersburg architects. He worked in this Art Nouveau style. He created masterpieces. Honestly, just have a look at the photos and the details as I'm giving you the story. And so Northern Art Nouveau came from Sweden and Finland, obviously, to St. Petersburg. Local stones, granite, and some dark stones too. So no white marble, no yellow marble, no pink marble, no artificial marble on the facade decoration. So what do you get? You get that. We don't have a lot of orchids here. We don't have beautiful lilies. So you get some fishes, you get some owls, you get some local birds in the decoration. So Bubur is known for having created a lot of whimsical creatures as well, scary masks. I mean, had okay, I know that Garshin had already died by then, but the house was built early 1900. But had he seen those masks, I'm sure he would have jumped from this very building. I'm pretty sure. Well, but anyway, it's the Art Nouveau. Look at this rusty looking stones and the facade on the first and the second level. And again, the same thing with Art Nouveau, the building has to be beautiful from like 360 degrees. And we will have that for sure. We are going next time because I have another tour in 7 minutes from now. We are going to stop here. We are going to visit a beautiful lobby. Trust me, it's beautiful. But anyway, we have to wait for this till next week. I haven't scheduled the next episode yet because I'm a little bit not sure how my time is going to look like. Also, as I said, that I will have to put off my tomorrow's tours maybe by 1 hour later, or maybe 90 minutes later because of the time difference if I get to Israel, of course. Oh, it's giving me so many mental vibes, so many yellow vibes. Hospital. I don't know. I should probably not talk about it. I shouldn't think about it, but I think about it. But anyway, so I'm sharing with you the links. In 6 minutes from now, I will be waiting to catch up with you in the Yelagan Island. The chat is open. Let me know if you have any questions. We have time for some quick Q&A. Sorry that I scheduled tours in this really back-to-back manner, but I didn't have much choice this time, unfortunately. But I will try not to do that whenever I can. And also, there's one more thing to say that thank you, Lena. Thank you so much. I'm taking you to the Yelagan Island. That's the opposite story. So if you're looking for some, opulence, grandeur, that's definitely Yelagan Island. It's a quiet area. It's a quiet palace with very few people there. But it gives you the story of the royal family, focusing mainly on the mother of Nicholas II, the last Russian monarch, and just some interiors. Pet the kitty if you go. Oh, absolutely! I'm going to cuddle the Kisa. I'm going to cuddle Kisa. Oh yes, definitely. That's one of the reasons to go. One of the reasons I miss her a lot. Definitely. I'm going to take some selfies with her for sure. I'm sure you miss her just as much as I do. She was a big part of my tours. Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. I will be sharing this recording, around these days for sure. Thank you, Cindy. I need to take a deep breath. Hold on, Grisha, a second. Что такое? Oh, okay. My son wants to share with you something. Okay, I have a minute only. Okay, so he's also into like embroidery and knitting and sewing. So I gave him my old skirt, and he's going to embroider my name. It's Anna, and uh, in the very center, so everyone will know what my name is. Isn't it cute? But he still hasn't given up on the idea of building the big cell phone factory as well, which we need $200,000. It's just for the beginning. 225 $225,000 we need. Yes. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you soon in Yelagin Island, in Yelagin Palace. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything, Grisha. Keep going. Thank you. I'll see you soon. Thanks for everything and for all the support. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you, Adrian. I'll try to. Yeah, I'm gonna ask also Trump for that.